I gave my husband my kidney so he could leave, but instead, he replaced me with another woman. He said I was incomplete. After all, I only had one kidney. Funny how he needed mine to survive and still thought he could replace me.
I'm sorry, Isabella, but I can't be with a woman with just one kidney.
I gave you my kidney so you could survive, and this is what you say to me. I can't believe you would replace me with another woman after saving your life.
You have to understand, Isabella, I'm doing this for you.
Damn you, Daniel.
I didn't scream, I didn't beg, I didn't fight in public. I planned. What happened next wasn't loud, it wasn't messy, it was calculated. Stay with me, besties, for I'm about to shock you with my revenge. This is African Tales by Golden. Abuja did not build men like Daniel Adeyemi overnight. He was born into marble floors and polished reputation. The Adeyemi name carried weight in Maitama, in Asokoro, in the quiet boardrooms where oil contracts were signed without noise. His father, Chief Richard Adeyemi, believed in legacy. His mother, Evelyn Adeyemi, believed in image. Daniel believed in freedom. By 32, he had already taken over a division of his father's logistics company. Calm, articulate, strategic, he was the type of man older politicians trusted and younger entrepreneurs admired. He met Isabella Okoye on a Tuesday afternoon that smelled of dust and rain. It was at a charity fundraiser in Wusetu, one of those polished events where wealthy people pretend to be humble for photographs. Isabella wasn't there for attention. She worked as a program coordinator for a health foundation, and she moved through the hall with quiet efficiency, adjusting banners, calming volunteers, solving problems before they became visible. Daniel noticed her because she did not notice him. She was not intimidated by his surname. She did not hover. She did not flirt. When he finally introduced himself, she smiled politely and said, "I know who you are, but I'm working." He laughed. That was the beginning. Their courtship was simple, almost surprisingly ordinary for a man of his background. Late-night drives through the quiet streets of Abuja. Suya stops in Garki, where he removed his wristwatch so no one would recognize him. Conversations about building something meaningful, not just profitable. Isabella came from a middle-class family in Enugu. Her father was a school principal, her mother sold fabrics. She was raised on discipline, faith, and self-respect. She was not impressed by money. She was impressed by consistency. Daniel gave her that. For 2 years, he showed up. When he proposed, it was not dramatic. No helicopter, no orchestra. Just dinner on a balcony overlooking the city lights. His voice steady, his eyes sincere. "I don't want a wife for status. I want a partner." She believed him. The wedding was everything his family wanted it to be. A cathedral ceremony in Abuja. 200 guests. White roses imported from Kenya. Politicians in the front pews. Business associates shaking hands beneath crystal chandeliers. Evelyn Adeyemi approved of Isabella's grace. Chief Adeyemi approved of her modest background. She would be easy to guide. Isabella walked into the marriage with love. The Adeyemis welcomed her with calculated warmth. At first, nothing felt wrong. The first year of marriage was gentle. They moved into a modern duplex in Asokoro. Glass walls, clean lines, quiet log filling. Daniel worked long hours expanding one of the family's logistics companies, but he came home every night. He held her waist in the kitchen while she cooked. He kissed her forehead before meetings. He spoke about children like they were inevitable blessings. On Sundays, they attended church together. On Fridays, they hosted small dinners. On some evenings, they simply sat on the balcony, her head on his shoulder, the city glowing below them. They were not loud lovers. They were steady. And steady love can feel unbreakable. 5 years later, their home was no longer just polished marble and expensive art. It had life. Their son, Ethan Adeyemi, was 4 years old, observant, soft-spoken like his mother, a quiet child who liked building things with his father on Saturday mornings. 2 years after Ethan came Zara. Zara was fire. Loud laughter, constant questions, Daniel's weakness. Their house was not silent wealth anymore. It was toys on Persian rugs, finger paintings on refrigerator doors, tiny shoes scattered by the staircase. And Daniel was present. He attended school events. He read bedtime stories. He still held Isabella in the kitchen when the children went looking. There was no sign of fracture. If anything, the marriage had matured beautifully. 5 years in, they had moved beyond romance into partnership. They understood each other's rhythms. They argued without cruelty. They recovered without ego. Isabella trusted him, not blindly, but fully. And Daniel, in those years, loved her in a way that felt grounded, not dramatic, not performative, just consistent. That consistency is what made what happened later unbearable. It began so subtly no one noticed. Daniel started coming home tired. Not the usual tired, something heavier. At first, they blamed work expansion. He had taken on new contracts, long meetings, late negotiations. Then the fatigue lingered. Headaches, swelling in his legs, moments where he would sit down mid-conversation and press his fingers to his temple. Isabella was the first to insist on hospital tests. "Let's not guess," she told him gently. He resisted at first, pride more than fear, but she booked the appointment anyway. The diagnosis did not come immediately. There were weeks of uncertainty. Blood work, scans, more consultations. Until one afternoon, in a quiet specialist office in Maitama, a consultant nephrologist spoke the words that split their life in two. Severe kidney failure. Both kidneys deteriorating. Immediate dialysis. Transplant likely necessary. Daniel sat very still. Isabella felt her ears ring. He was 37. Too young, too strong, too disciplined. It didn't make sense. Dialysis began quickly. The children were told Daddy was sick but getting better. Daniel hated it. He hated the weakness. He hated the dependency. He hated watching his wife manage the house, the children, and sit beside him during treatment without complaining. The Adeyemi family moved into crisis mode. Private specialists, overseas consultations, every available medical option explored. Family members were tested for compatibility. None matched. Not his younger sister, not his cousins, not even extended relatives who volunteered publicly for reputation. Time was not patient. Dialysis was keeping him alive, but barely. One evening, after another exhausting hospital visit, Isabella sat beside his bed and asked quietly, "Maybe I should get tested as well." The room went silent. Daniel shook his head immediately. No. His mother frowned. His father hesitated. The doctors explained that spousal matches were possible but not guaranteed. She insisted. They tested her. Perfect match. Perfect. The word echoed differently this time. Not destiny, responsibility. The Adeyemi family did not command her. They persuaded her. Evelyn held her hands and whispered, "You are strong. You have given us grandchildren. You can survive this. Chief Adeyemi promised lifetime security. Daniel begged her not to. But beneath his refusal was fear, not just of losing her, but of owing her. She saw none of that. She saw her husband, the father of her children, the man who had shown up for 5 steady years. And she chose. The surgery lasted hours. Daniel's body accepted the kidney almost immediately. Recovery for him was swift. Recovery for her was slower. Pain sharper. Movement restricted. Doctors firm. 1 kidney now. No heavy lifting. No physical stress. Long-term discipline required. She followed instructions carefully. For the first 3 months after surgery, Daniel was tender, overprotective. He hired extra help at home, sent flowers weekly, bought her jewelry she never asked for. At family gatherings, he would hold her hand and say, "My wife gave me life." People applauded her, praised her devotion, called her blessed. And Isabella believed the hardest chapter was over. She believed sacrifice had strengthened the foundation. She believed 5 years of steady love could withstand anything. She did not yet understand something dangerous. Sometimes, when a man survives because of a woman, he does not feel grateful. He feels smaller. And Daniel Adeyemi was beginning to feel it. Quietly, unspoken, growing. The first change was not loud. It was absence. 3 months after the surgery, Daniel had recovered faster than anyone expected. His skin regained its warmth. His voice regained authority. The doctors were pleased. His blood work stabilized beautifully. At home, life tried to return to rhythm. But rhythm, once broken, never returns exactly the same. Daniel resumed work full-time. At first, Isabella encouraged it. She believed productivity would restore his confidence. She managed the children carefully, protecting her body the way the doctors instructed. No heavy lifting, no strain, no stress. Daniel repeated those words often. "You shouldn't carry Zara. Let the nanny handle it. Go rest." It sounded caring, but slowly something in his tone shifted. Rest began to sound like limitation. He started staying out later. Board meetings stretched into midnight. Client dinners became frequent. New partnerships required travel. Isabella did not question him at first. She had never needed to. Trust built over 5 years does not evaporate in one evening. But she began noticing details. The faint trace of perfume not hers. The way he showered immediately upon returning home. The way he placed his phone face down on the bedside table. Small things. Small things are never small. The family visits increased. Evelyn Adeyemi began stopping by in the afternoons. Always polite, always composed. She would sit in the living room, watching Isabella carefully. "You look thinner," she would say lightly. "I'm fine," Isabella would reply. "You must not exhaust yourself. Remember what the doctors said." The emphasis was subtle. Remember what the doctors said. At dinners, the comments grew sharper, still wrapped in civility. Chief Adeyemi once remarked while stirring his tea, "A man at Daniel's level requires stability, health, energy." He did not look at her directly. He didn't need to. Daniel began going to the gym aggressively. Rebuilding his body became an obsession. He hired a private trainer, adjusted his diet, talked constantly about vitality. "I refuse to be weak again," he told Isabella one night, eyes hard. She smiled, proud of his determination. But she noticed something else. When he looked at her, there was calculation. He began touching her less, Not cold, not distant, just less. Their intimacy became careful, measured. Once, when she tried to initiate closeness, he pulled back gently. "You shouldn't stress your body," he said. It sounded responsible. It felt like rejection. She met the other woman by accident. Her name was Vanessa Cole, half Nigerian, half British, raised partly in London, and recently returned to Abuja to manage an interior design firm that handled luxury properties. Isabella saw her first at a corporate charity gala. Ironic symmetry. Vanessa stood beside Daniel as if she belonged there. Confident posture, easy laughter, a hand resting briefly on his arm. Too familiar. Daniel introduced them calmly. "Vanessa handles some of our design projects." Vanessa smiled at Isabella with polite curiosity. "Oh, you're the wife. I've heard so much about you." The sentence held weight. Not admiration, assessment. Isabella noticed how Vanessa's eyes lingered, not on her face, but on the faint surgical scar visible at her neckline. It was brief, but deliberate. The confrontation did not happen immediately. It unfolded gradually. Late-night calls that stopped when she entered the room. A cancelled anniversary dinner due to urgent business. A business trip extended without notice. Then one evening, while putting Ethan to bed, she overheard Daniel downstairs. His voice was different. Soft, playful, intimate, not business. She stood on the staircase long enough to hear Vanessa laugh through the speaker. That laugh did something irreversible inside her. She did not scream. She did not confront him that night. She waited. The next morning, she asked calmly, "Are you seeing someone else?" Daniel didn't immediately deny it. That pause was worse than confession. "It's complicated," he said. "Nothing is ever complicated. It is simply chosen." The family meeting happened 2 weeks later. It was orchestrated. She knew that the moment she walked into the main sitting room and saw Chief Adeyemi seated formally, Evelyn beside him, Daniel stiff in an armchair. Vanessa was not present, but her presence filled the room. Evelyn began gently. "We need to discuss Daniel's future." Isabella felt her heart beat slow. Not fast, slow. Chief Adeyemi spoke next. "You have been a good wife. You saved our son. For that, we will always be grateful." Grateful, past tense. But circumstances evolve, he continued. Daniel requires strength beside him, stability, full capacity. A woman who can perform the wifely duties well and make our son happy. The words were clinical. Evelyn leaned forward. "The doctors advised no stress for you. You cannot overexert yourself. A household of this magnitude demands more." Daniel remained silent. Silent. 5 years of loyalty, 2 children, 1 kidney, and he remained silent. Finally, he spoke. "I can't live cautiously forever," he said. "I need a wife who is whole, strong, present." Whole. The word landed like a slap. "You're not being sent away," Evelyn added smoothly. "You will remain here, respected, the mother of his children, but Daniel will take a second wife." Second wife. As if this were a board decision. As if she were a contract renegotiation. Isabella looked at Daniel. Not angry, not pleading, just searching. "Is this what you want?" she asked. He held her gaze. Yes. No hesitation. No apology, just ego reclaimed. Vanessa moved in 3 weeks later. Not into Isabella's bedroom, but into the house. A renovated wing, new furniture, new energy. Vanessa did not pretend to be humble. She walked through the house as if surveying territory. One afternoon, she said casually while passing Isabella in the hallway, "You should rest more. You've done enough." The tone was honeyed poison. Something inside Isabella broke. Not loudly, not dramatically. It broke the way bone fractures under pressure. Silent and permanent. She stopped arguing, stopped reacting, stopped crying where anyone could see. She began watching, listening, learning. By the time Daniel began openly discussing expansion plans with Vanessa by his side, by the time the family publicly introduced her at social functions, by the time whispers began circulating that Isabella was too fragile for a man of status, Isabella had already made her decision. Not in anger, not in impulse, but in clarity. He had needed her body to live. Now he would learn what living without her protection truly meant. The final humiliation happened at home. Daniel asked her to meet him in the study. He did not sit. He stood behind the desk like a man concluding business. "It will be easier," he said carefully, "if Vanessa and I take the master bedroom." "Easier? For who?" Isabella asked quietly. "For everyone." The room was silent for a long time. He avoided her eyes. He continued, "You will move into the east wing. It's more private, more comfortable. You need rest anyway." Rest, that word again. She nodded once. No argument, no tears, no raised voice. That unsettled him more than anger would have. By evening, her clothes had been relocated. Her side of the wardrobe emptied. Her framed photos replaced with new ones. Vanessa's perfume filled the master suite. Isabella stood in the doorway once the movers left. 5 years of shared nights erased in a single afternoon. The bed where she had held him during dialysis weakness. The bathroom where she helped him when he could barely stand. The mirror where she first saw the surgical scar healing across her abdomen. All of it now occupied. Rewritten. Vanessa laughed inside. Light, careless laughter. Daniel closed the door. That sound did something irreversible inside Isabella. Not pain, not rage, something colder, something surgical. That night, in her new bedroom, smaller, isolated, sterile, she lay awake staring at the ceiling. Her body still ached some mornings. Her scar still tightened in cold weather. Her energy still came in measured portions. She had given him flesh, and he had given her exile. Something cracked open inside her, not a dramatic shatter, a quiet fracture. The part of her that believed love would protect her died that night. In its place, something sharper formed. Over the next week, she began researching, not recklessly, carefully, late at night, in silence, using private devices, reading medical journals, transplant case studies, patient forums. She did not look for death. She looked for vulnerability. A transplanted organ is a delicate truce between body and chemistry. It survives because of strict balance, and balance can be disturbed. She learnt enough. Not everything, just enough. Daniel returned from a follow-up appointment with renewed prescriptions, adjustments to maintain stability, additional protective medication. He left the pharmacy bag casually on the dresser in the master bedroom, trusting the house, trusting routine, trusting her. That night, when the house was quiet and Vanessa's soft breathing drifted from behind the master suite door, Isabella stood in the hallway. Her feet were silent on the marble floor. She hesitated for only a second, then she turned the handle. The room smelled different now, stranger, occupied. Vanessa slept on Daniel's side of the bed. Daniel lay on his back, breathing deeply, strong, unaware. The medication sat on the dresser, neatly arranged. Isabella moved slowly. No shaking hands, no racing pulse, just precision. She opened the bottles carefully, replaced what needed to be replaced, closed them exactly as they were, aligned them precisely as she had found them. No disturbance, no evidence. She stood for a moment longer, looking at him, at the man who once trembled in her arms, at the man who had begged her not to risk her life for his, at the man who later declared her incomplete. "You needed me to live," she whispered silently. Then she left. The change did not happen overnight. That would have been suspicious. It began with small complaints, fatigue, headaches, subtle swelling. Daniel dismissed it. Vanessa blamed work stress. At the next checkup, the doctor frowned. "Your levels are slightly irregular." Daniel laughed it off. "I'm following everything exactly." He was. Exactly. He took the pills every morning, every evening, never missing a dose. He trusted the labels, the routine, the system. He did not realize the system had changed. Weeks passed. The symptoms deepened. Blood pressure spikes, unexplained inflammation, lab results that didn't align. The doctor grew more serious. "Have you changed anything?" he asked. "No," Daniel insisted. Isabella stood beside him, calm, concerned, supportive. The perfect former wife. At night, Daniel grew restless. He snapped more easily, sweated through his shirts, struggled to sleep. Vanessa began to look irritated instead of affectionate. "This is not what I signed up for," she muttered under her breath. Isabella heard. She said nothing. One evening, Daniel sat on the edge of the bed, holding his head. "What if it's rejecting?" he asked quietly. The fear in his voice was familiar. She remembered that fear. She had once comforted it. Now she simply said, "You've done everything right." And she meant it. He had done everything right, except choose the wrong enemy. Cold revenge is not explosive. It is intimate. It requires proximity, access, patience. Isabella had all three. The man who claimed he needed a whole woman was now dependent on something fragile. And fragility, once disturbed, rarely forgives arrogance. The decline did not whisper anymore. It roared. Daniel's follow-up appointment lasted longer than expected. Isabella sat beside him in the sterile consultation room, hands folded neatly on her lap, the image of composed concern. The nephrologist's tone shifted from professional calm to clinical urgency. "We need to run additional tests immediately." Daniel frowned. "But I've been compliant." "Yes," the doctor replied carefully. "That's what concerns me." Blood panels, imaging, biopsy. 3 days later, the verdict arrived like a sealed sentence. The transplanted kidney was failing rapidly. Worse, the strain had affected his remaining native kidney beyond recovery. Both kidneys were now critically damaged. Daniel stared at the doctor as if language had betrayed him. "That's impossible," he whispered. The doctor did not argue. "You will need an urgent transplant. Without one?" He paused. "You are looking at weeks, possibly a month." A month, 30 days to measure regret. The Adeyemi family panicked, not privately, loudly. Phones rang non-stop, international contacts were called, hospitals abroad were consulted, money was offered, obscene amounts. Because money had always solved their problems, surely it would solve this one. Compatibility testing began again. Relatives, extended relatives, distant cousins who hadn't attended Christmas in years. No match. The clock did not slow down. And then came the delicate conversation. Vanessa. She arrived at the hospital dressed in cream, composed but visibly uneasy. Evelyn approached her gently. "You should get tested," she said. Vanessa blinked. "For what?" "For Daniel." Silence. Vanessa looked at Daniel, pale, thinner, weaker by the day. Then she looked at Isabella, who stood quietly in the corner holding a flask of homemade soup. Vanessa's voice remained steady. "I will not donate my kidney to anyone." Daniel's breath caught. "It's temporary," Chief Adeyemi insisted. "You would be saving your husband." Vanessa laughed softly. "My husband?" No one liked the way she said that. "I'm not Isabella. I'm not foolish enough to reduce myself for a man who will replace me the moment I become inconvenient." The room stiffened. "You saw what you did to her," Vanessa added lightly, gesturing toward Isabella. "And now you expect me to volunteer?" Daniel looked away. Vanessa straightened her bag on her shoulder. "I was not born to suffer. Find another solution. I'm out of here." And she walked out. No tears, no hesitation, no backglance. The family called her wicked, cruel, heartless, ungrateful. Isabella remained silent. The irony floated above the hospital bed like perfume. As Daniel's body weakened, Vanessa's visits reduced. First daily, then weekly, then important meetings began interfering. Within 10 days, she stopped coming entirely. Her belongings were quietly removed from the master bedroom. History repeated itself with efficiency. And Isabella? She stepped forward. Of course she did. She cooked, she monitored, she adjusted pillows, she wiped sweat from his forehead during fever spikes. The nurses praised her devotion. "You are a strong woman," one said. Isabella smiled softly. Strength. Such a flexible word. At night, when Daniel drifted between sleep and fear, he would reach for her hand. "You are still here," he whispered once. "Yes," she replied. Of course she was. Revenge, when served cold, requires presence. Dialysis resumed aggressively, but his body was deteriorating faster than machines could compensate. His face hollowed, his voice thinned, his confidence evaporated entirely. The man who once declared he needed a complete woman now needed help sitting upright. Life has a sense of humor. 3 weeks into the month, the doctor stopped using hopeful language. "We are running out of time." International donor registries failed. Private arrangements collapsed. Nothing matched. Daniel began signing documents, asset transfers, trust adjustments, emergency authorizations. One evening, weak and trembling, he asked for Isabella alone. The room cleared. He looked at her, truly looked at her for the first time in months. "I was wrong," he said hoarsely. She tilted her head slightly. "About? About you, about everything." He coughed painfully. "You gave me life, and I..." He didn't finish. He didn't need to. Tears slid down his temples into the pillow. "I'm sorry." The apology arrived too late to matter. Isabella squeezed his hand gently. "It's okay," she said. And she meant it. It was okay, because justice was already in motion. He signed everything over to her. Properties, shares, full control of the foundation, guardianship structures for the children. "My children deserve you," he whispered. He died 4 days later, quietly, in the early hours of morning, with Isabella seated beside him, calm, composed, watching the final breath leave his body. No dramatic last words, no revelation, no suspicion. He died believing fate had betrayed him. He never realized fate had a name. The funeral was grand. Politicians returned. Sympathy flowed freely. The Adeyemi empire stood temporarily unstable. Vanessa did not attend. Officially, she had traveled. Unofficially, she had vanished. Isabella wore black, perfectly tailored, perfectly dignified. People whispered about her strength again. They always did. Isabella cried when appropriate. She did not collapse. That would have been theatrical. Within months, she finalized full legal control of Daniel's holdings. The children remained with her. The empire functioned under her authority. The same family who once called her incomplete now depended on her signatures. Life is sarcastic that way. Did she regret it? No. Regret belongs to people who act in chaos. She had acted in clarity. He needed strength. She gave him consequence. For 12 months after the funeral, Isabella did something the Adeyemi family did not expect. She lived. Not quietly, not modestly, lived. She took Ethan and Zara to Paris for the summer. They sketched by the Seine. They rode horses in Spain. She bought herself a watch in Geneva that cost more than the annual salary of the man who once called her incomplete. She hosted board meetings from 5-star resorts. She smiled more, slept deeply, ate without restriction, and occasionally, when she passed a mirror, she admired the scar across her abdomen. It had cost her a kidney. It had earned her an empire. Fair trade. The Adeyemi family watched all of this with stiff jaws. They expected morning. She gave them momentum. One evening at a private dinner in Lagos, not a charity summit this time, but a strategic investment gathering, she met Andrew Mensah. Not by accident. He had been observing her from across the room long before they were introduced. Widower, financial strategist, quiet confidence, the kind of man who did not need to announce intelligence. He did not treat her like a widow. He treated her like an equal. Weeks turned into months of deliberate conversations. No desperation, no performance, just alignment. When he asked her to marry him, it was not dramatic. "I want a partner," he said simply, "not a trophy." She almost laughed at the irony. She informed the Adeyemi family out of courtesy. Courtesy is such a generous thing. They called an emergency meeting at the estate. Chief Adeyemi spoke first. "You cannot remarry." Isabella blinked slowly. "I beg your pardon?" "You manage our son's empire," Evelyn added sharply. "Your loyalty remains here." "Daniel is gone," Isabella replied calmly. "I am not." "You are the mother of his children," Chief Adeyemi continued. "Remarriage complicates inheritance structures." Translation: control will slip. Isabella leaned back in her chair. "For clarity," she said softly, "are you asking me to remain single indefinitely to protect your pride?" Evelyn's jaw tightened. "You owe this family." Isabella smiled. "I donated a kidney. We are even." Silence fell like a dropped plate. The threat. 2 days later, official documents arrived. Legal notice. They intended to challenge her control of the empire if she proceeded with remarriage. Andrew read the document without emotion. He said, "They are bluffing." "Are they?" she asked. "They've confused grief with leverage." He made one phone call, not to a random lawyer, to a name that made people in Abuja sit upright. Within a week, their legal response was drafted, airtight, aggressive, humiliating in its precision. The Adeyemi family had underestimated 2 things. 1, the documentation Daniel signed before dying. 2, Andrew's appetite for courtroom warfare. The case moved quickly. Public enough to bruise reputations, private enough to protect the children. Their argument: she could not remarry while stewarding Daniel's assets. Her lawyer's response: there was no legal clause restricting her personal autonomy. Chief Adeyemi sat rigid in court as the judge summarized the facts. Mrs. Isabella Adeyemi retains full rights to her property, business holdings, and personal decisions, including remarriage. Gavel. Final. The family's control fantasy dissolved in under 30 seconds. Outside the courthouse, Evelyn approached her. "You are destroying Daniel's memory." Isabella adjusted her sunglasses. "No," she replied evenly. "You did that when you replaced me." And she walked away. Her first wedding was elegant. White roses, crystal chandeliers, politicians in the front pews, a bride full of hope. That wedding had been about love. This one was about power. Not loud power, earned power. The ceremony was held at a private coastal estate, discreet but impossible to ignore. The guest list was curated, not crowded. No opportunists, no hypocrites pretending loyalty. She did not wear white. She wore ivory silk, structured, regal, deliberate. A gown that did not float, it commanded. Andrew stood beside her, not as a rescuer, not as a replacement, but as a man who understood exactly who she was. The Adeyemi family was not in attendance, not because they weren't invited, because they were no longer necessary. As Isabella walked down the aisle, she did not feel like a widow remarrying. She felt like a woman choosing, freely. When Andrew said his vows, he didn't promise protection, he promised partnership. "I choose you," he said, holding her gaze, "exactly as you are." The applause that followed was not polite, it was certain. No manipulation, no negotiation, no second wife waiting in a separate wing, just clarity. The Adeyemi family eventually adjusted. They had no choice. The empire still generated revenue, the grandchildren still carried the name, and Isabella still signed the checks. She did not erase them. She simply refused to shrink for them. Vacations continued. Investment expanded. Her children grew in stability. And sometimes, during quiet evenings on the balcony of her new home, larger than their Socorro estate, she would sip wine and think about the month Daniel had been given. 1 month, 30 days. Enough time to realize that arrogance is expensive. She never regretted what she did. Regret is for people who lose. She reorganized her life. She reclaimed her dignity. She secured her children. Cold revenge does not scream. It reorganizes the world. And Isabella never once looked back. Before we continue, let me ask you something. If you gave your husband a kidney and he replaced you like expired furniture, would you walk away peacefully, or would you make him feel exactly what you felt? Be honest though, was Isabella wrong, or did he simply reap what he planted? Tell me in the comments. I want to see who is choosing peace and who is choosing premium revenge. And if you love stories that make you question loyalty, pride, and consequences, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Thank you for being here, besties. Bye.